The auction room in Geneva smelled like old money and quiet fear. 42 of the richest men in the world sat in red velvet chairs, waiting for the last item of the night. It was not a painting. It was not a diamond. It was a company. A South Korean shipping and pharmaceutical empire called Han Group, valued at $18 billion, was being sold piece by piece in front of them because its chairman had been arrested 3 days ago for tax fraud. But none of these men were really here for Han Group. They were here to see the buyer. For 6 months, a mysterious investor known only by the codename Listener had been quietly buying every share of Han Group through more than 90 shell companies in 11 countries. Nobody knew who Listener was. Nobody had seen his face. They only knew 2 things. He had cash that did not run out, and he wanted Han Group so badly he was paying twice the market price for shares that nobody was selling. At 9:47 p.m., the auctioneer cleared his throat. Lot 43, the final 12% of Han Group voting shares. Starting bid. A voice cut him off from the back of the room. I will buy them all. Tonight. In cash. Every head turned. A young man stood up. He could not have been older than 20. His skin was the color of warm cedar. His hair was short and black. He wore no tie, no rings, no watch. He looked like he had walked in from a university library, not a billion-dollar auction. The auctioneer stammered. And your name, sir? For the record? The young man smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was a smile that had waited a very long time to exist. My name, he said, is the name my father refused to write on a birth certificate. But tonight, you can write it on the deed. He placed a single photograph on the table in front of him. The cameras of 42 of the richest men in the world zoomed in. It was a photo of a black woman, maybe 25 years old, holding her pregnant belly and crying in front of a marble gate. Behind her, a Korean man in a white suit was walking away with another woman on his arm. The young man tapped the crying woman's face gently. Her name was Asha, he said. And in 6 minutes, the family that threw her into the street will belong to her son. Asha Adeyemi was born in Lagos, Nigeria, and raised in London by her mother, a nurse, after her father died of malaria when she was 4. She grew up smart, quiet, and stubborn. By the time she was 22, she had a scholarship to study pharmaceutical chemistry at Imperial College London and a part-time job at a small Korean tea shop in Camden Town. That tea shop is where she met Hein Da-jin. He walked in one rainy Tuesday wearing a coat that cost more than her year's rent, sat in the corner, and ordered the same green tea for 3 hours straight. He did not look at his phone. He did not look at anyone. He looked at Asha. Every time she walked past his table, he watched her like she was a problem he could not solve. On the 4th hour, she walked up and said, Sir, either order food or leave. You are scaring the other customers. He looked up, surprised, and laughed. It was the first time he had laughed in 3 months. Marry me, he said. She rolled her eyes. Pay your bill first. He did. Then he came back the next day, and the next, and the day after that. Daejin did not tell her who he was for almost 2 months. He let her believe he was just a Korean businessman visiting London. When she finally asked, he sat her down in a cafe in Notting Hill, took both her hands, and told her the truth. He was Han Daejin, only son of the Han family, heir to one of the most feared Chaebol empires in South Korea. His family's wealth was not just money, it was power. Politicians, prosecutors, even some judges in Seoul answered when his father called. The official businesses and shipping, pharma, hotel were the clean face. The other half, the shadow half, was a network of smuggling routes, off-the-books contracts, and quiet violence that had built the Han name across 4 generations. He told her all of this, and then he said, "I do not want any of it. I want you. I want a quiet life. I want to leave Korea forever." Asha was 23. She was in love. She believed him. 6 months later, they got married in a small registry office in London with 2 witnesses. She wore a yellow dress. He wore a borrowed jacket. They ate Nigerian jollof rice and Korean tteokbokki at a tiny restaurant after. It was the happiest day of her life. It was also the last truly happy day of her life. Dae-jin had promised her a quiet life. He could not keep that promise. 3 months after the wedding, his father was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 weeks after that, his father was dead. And the Han family did what powerful families do. They pulled their heir back home. Dae-jin tried to fight it, he really did. But his mother, Madame Han Soo-ja, was not a woman who lost arguments. She flew to London personally. She sat across from Asha in their small flat, looked at her for 1 full minute without blinking, and then said in perfect English, "You have 2 choices. Come to Seoul with my son and learn to be a Han, or stay here and watch him be destroyed from across the sea. Either way, he is coming home tonight." Asha looked at her husband. Dae-jin looked at the floor. She went to Seoul. The Han estate sat on the side of a mountain just outside the city. It had 31 rooms, a private chapel, 2 helicopter pads, and a wall so high birds got tired flying over it. On her first morning, Asha woke up to find 7 women standing in her bedroom. Tutors, Korean language, Korean etiquette, tea ceremony, walking, eating, even smiling. There was a tutor for smiling. Madame Han did not speak to her for the first 3 weeks. On the 22nd day, the old woman walked into the garden where Asha was practicing her bow, watched her for a moment and said, "You will never be one of us. But if you give my son a son, the family will tolerate you. Do you understand?" Asha did not answer. She bowed. Because she had learned by then that silence was the only language that did not get her in trouble. There was someone else watching, too. Her name was Choi Yoo-jin. Yoo-jin was 26, beautiful in the cold, perfect way that magazine covers are beautiful. She was the daughter of a Korean prosecutor, a powerful one, and she had been engaged to Dae-jin since they were 14 years old. It was the kind of engagement Chaebol families arrange the way other families arrange dinner plans, quietly, certainly, and without asking the children involved. When Dae-jin married Asha, Yoo-jin had said nothing. She had smiled at the news. She had sent flowers. And then she had moved into a small apartment 10 minutes from the Han estate and waited. Asha did not know Yoo-jin existed. Not for a long time. 8 months into Seoul, Asha got pregnant. She found out on a Tuesday morning. She did not tell Dae-jin first. She did not tell Madame Han. She told the only person in that house who had ever been kind to her, an old gardener named Mr. Park who used to leave warm sweet potatoes in her room on cold days. He cried when she told him. Then he ran to the main house to ring the bell. The whole estate stopped working. Madame Han walked out of her study, looked at Asha's belly, and for the first time in 9 months, she smiled. It was a small, careful smile, but it was real. "Boy or girl," the old woman said, "you will be looked after." Daijin came home that night and held Asha for 2 hours without speaking. Then he said something she would never forget. "I am going to fix everything," he whispered. "I promise you. I'm going to fix everything before this baby is born." She thought he meant his family. She thought he meant his work. She thought he meant the shadow business. He did not mean any of those things. He meant Eugene. Because what Asha did not know, what nobody had told her, was that 2 months earlier, Daejin's mother had quietly arranged for Eugene to start visiting the Han estate again, to help with cultural matters. And what Madame Han also did not know, what nobody knew, was that Daejin and Eugene had been sleeping together for 4 months. Eugene was pregnant too, 3 weeks ahead of Asha. It happened at the family's annual harvest dinner in the great hall of the Han estate in front of 240 guests. Asha was 7 months pregnant. She wore a soft, cream-colored hanbok that Madame Han had personally chosen for her. She walked into the hall on Daejin's arm, and for the first time in her life as a Han, she felt almost like she belonged. Then the doors at the other end of the hall opened. Eugene walked in. She wore red. She was also pregnant, visibly pregnant, 6.5 months at least. The room went silent, the way a forest goes silent before a tree falls. Madame Han stood up so fast her chair scraped the marble floor. "What is this?" Daejin let go of Asha's hand. He walked across the hall. Slowly. 240 people watched him. He stopped in front of Eugene, took her hand, and turned to face the room. "This," he said, loud enough for the back row to hear, "is the woman I should have married. This is the child who will inherit the Han name." Then he looked at his wife, his pregnant 24-year-old wife standing alone by the door in a cream hanbok his mother had bought her. "Asha," he said, "I deny this pregnancy. The child you carry is not mine. I want you out of this house tonight." Asha did not scream. She did not cry. She just stood there with one hand on her belly and the other hand reaching for a wall that was not there. A photographer hired for the dinner took a single photo in that moment. It was the photo that, 20 years later, a young man in a Geneva auction room would place on a table in front of 42 billionaires. Madame Han did not say a word. She looked at her son. She looked at Eugene. She looked at Asha. And then, very quietly, she turned and walked out of the hall. That was the last time Asha ever saw her. Security walked Asha out of the estate at 11:47 p.m. with one suitcase. No passport, no phone, no money. Just the clothes on her back and a baby she could feel kicking against her ribs. They left her at the front gate, in the rain. Asha walked for 2 hours that night. She did not know where she was going. She had no Korean money, no Korean phone, and her English-speaking friends were all back in London. At one point, she sat down on a stone bench near a temple and seriously thought about not getting up again. That is where the woman found her. Her name was Mrs. Oyalaran. She was a Nigerian embassy worker, 52 years old, on her way home from a late shift. She had been a nurse in Lagos before she moved to Seoul. She saw Asha sitting in the rain in a soaked silk hanbok, recognized the look of a woman who had nothing left, and stopped her car. "Sister," she said in Yoruba, "come." Asha did not have the strength to ask why. She just got into the car. Mrs. Oyalaran took her home, fed her, put her in a warm bed. did not ask a single question for 3 days. On the fourth day, when Asha finally spoke, the whole story came out. The marriage, the move to Seoul, the harvest dinner, the rain. Mrs. Oyalaran listened. Then she said something that Asha would carry with her for the rest of her short life. "My sister, you have two choices. You can spend the rest of your pregnancy trying to fight that family in their own country, in their own language, with their own judges, and you will lose. Or you can disappear, you can have your baby in peace, and one day when that baby is grown, that baby can do what you cannot." Asha chose to disappear. 2 weeks later, with the help of the Nigerian embassy and a sympathetic Korean nurse, Asha was on a quiet flight to Manila with a new passport, $6,000 in cash that Mrs. Oyalaran had insisted on giving her, and an unborn son who would one day be called Listener. She never went back to London. She never called her mother. She never sent a message to Daejin. As far as the Han family knew, Asha Adeyemi had walked out of their estate in the rain and vanished. That was exactly what she wanted them to think. Asha named him Kian. He was born in a small private clinic in Cebu, in the Philippines, at 4:11 a.m. on a warm March morning. The doctor placed him on her chest, and she cried so hard the nurse had to take him back for a moment because she was shaking. She did not give him Daejin's surname. She gave him hers, Kian Adeyemi. For the first 3 years of his life, they lived in a small apartment above a bakery in Cebu. Asha worked as a freelance English tutor and pharmaceutical translator for a local hospital. She lived quietly. She did not date. She did not make many friends. She did not let anyone take pictures of her son. When Kian was 4, she moved them to Lagos. She wanted him to know her family. Her mother, Kian's grandmother, was still alive, still working as a nurse, and she met her grandson for the first time at the airport. She held him for so long, the security guards came to check. In Lagos, Kian grew up smart, frighteningly smart. By age 6, he was reading 3 languages, English, Yoruba, and Korean. Yes, Korean. Asha had insisted. She did not tell him why. She just said, "One day you will need it. Learn now." He learned. He was also a quiet child, watchful. He noticed things other children did not notice. When the lady at the corner store gave him the wrong change, he counted it back to her exactly. When his teacher made a mistake in a math problem, he raised his hand and corrected her so politely that she was not even embarrassed. He had his mother's gentle eyes and his father's sharp mind, and the combination was something the world had not quite seen before. When Kian was 9, Asha got sick. It was sudden, a pain in her side, then a diagnosis, then a hospital bed, ovarian cancer, stage 3. The doctor said treatment could buy her 2 or 3 years if she was lucky. She fought for 4. Kian was 13 when his mother died. He was holding her hand. She had been waiting for him to come home from school. Before she closed her eyes, she said 3 things to him. The first was, "I love you more than anything that was ever made." The second was, "Promise me you will never become like the man who made you." The third was, "In my closet, behind the green suitcase, there is a box. Open it when you are 18, not before. Promise me." He promised her all 3 things, and then she was gone. For 5 years, Kian did not open the box. He moved in with his grandmother in Lagos. He went to school. He won every math competition he entered. At 15, he hacked his secondary school's grade system as a prank. and then immediately reported the security flaw to the principal. They offered him a job. He turned it down. At 16, he got a full scholarship to study computer science and finance at MIT in the United States. On his 18th birthday, in his small dorm room in Cambridge, Massachusetts, he opened the box. Inside, there were 4 things. The first was a photograph, the same photograph from the harvest dinner. His mother, crying, pregnant, in the rain. A Korean man in a white suit walking away from her with another woman. The second was a wedding ring, plain gold, his mother's. The third was a USB drive. On it were 3,000 pages of documents, bank transfers, smuggling manifests, names of bribed prosecutors, photographs of shipments, a map of every shadow route Han Group had used between 1998 and the year Keon was born. His mother had spent her last 2 years in Korea, quietly copying every file she could find in Daejin's study. She had carried it out of the estate in a hidden pocket of her handbag the night she was thrown out. The fourth was a letter, handwritten, 6 pages. The letter was from his mother. She told him everything: his father's name, his father's family, his father's empire, the Mistress, the harvest dinner, the rain, Mrs. Oyalaran, Cebu, Lagos, all of it. She ended the letter with one line: "My son, I do not ask you to forgive him. I do not even ask you to fight him. I only ask this: live well. If, one day, you choose to look him in the eye, look as a man who already has more than he ever did. Do not take from him out of anger. Take from him because you can." Mama. Kian read the letter 4 times. Then he opened his laptop, created a new email account, and applied to a summer internship at a small hedge fund in Boston. He was 18. He had 2 years. The internship turned into a job. The job turned into a partnership. The partnership turned into a small fund of his own. By age 19, Kian Adeyemi was managing $240 million of other people's money, and he had not lost a single trade. He worked under a fake name. He never appeared in photos. The financial newspapers called him Listener because he was famous for sitting silently in board meetings, listening to old men talk for hours, and then asking one single question that changed the whole deal. People in Boston joked that Listener probably did not even exist, probably just a smart algorithm with a Nigerian accent. He let them joke. Meanwhile, very quietly, very patiently, he was buying Han Group. It started small. Through a shell company in Singapore, he bought 4% of Han Group's pharmaceutical division. 6 months later, through a different shell in the Cayman Islands, he bought another 6%. The Han family noticed someone was accumulating their stock, but every time they tried to trace the buyer, the trail ended in a different country with a different lawyer. He also did one more thing. He sent 3 pages from his mother's USB drive, 3 carefully chosen pages, to a young, ambitious prosecutor in Seoul named Prosecutor Lim. Prosecutor Lim had been quietly building a corruption case against the Chaebols for years and had never had real evidence. Now she had it. She did not know where it had come from. She did not need to. The investigation into Han Group began in September. By December, the Korean tax authority had frozen 6 accounts. By February, Han Dae-jin, now Chairman Han, 51 years old, ruler of the empire, had been arrested at his own front door. By the time the Geneva auction took place 3 days later, Han Group's stock had collapsed by 68%. And a young man with warm brown skin and quiet eyes had bought every share that was for sale. while Kian was rising. What was happening to the family that had thrown his mother away? Yujin had given birth to a son 2 months after Asha disappeared. She had named him Han Jun-ho. The Han family had given him every advantage: private tutors, a name on the company shares before he could walk, a future planned out from cradle to chairman's office. But Jun-ho was not a happy child. His father, Dae-jin, was cold in a way Yujin had not expected. Maybe Dae-jin was punishing himself for what he had done to Asha. Maybe he had simply never loved anyone properly in his life. Either way, he raised Jun-ho with strict rules, no warmth, and no patience. By the time Jun-ho was 16, he was drinking. By 20, he had crashed 3 cars. By 25, he was a regular subject of Korean tabloid scandals. Yujin grew bitter. The marriage she had stolen turned out to be a cage with marble floors. She spent her 40s in expensive clinics for exhaustion. She and Dae-jin lived in the same house but did not eat in the same room. Madame Han, the old grandmother, lived to be 86. In her final years, she stopped speaking to Dae-jin almost entirely. The night before she died, she called her lawyer and changed her will. Most of her personal fortune, separate from Han Group, around $400 million US, was left to my true grandchild, wherever he or she may be, to be identified by genetic testing after my death. Nobody understood what she meant. Dae-jin had only one child, Jun-ho. The lawyer filed the clause and shrugged. But somewhere in Boston, a young man with a hedge fund and a USB drive read the news of the old woman's death and smiled for the first time in a long time. His grandmother had known. She had always known. Which brings us back to that rainy night in Geneva. When Kian stood up in that auction room and placed his mother's photograph on the table, every billionaire there understood, in different ways, that they were watching the end of something. The auctioneer's hand shook as he hit the gavel. "Sold," he whispered, "to the buyer in the back." Han Group, officially, now belonged to a 20-year-old boy from Lagos. Kian did not celebrate. He did not smile. He picked up the photograph of his mother, slid it back into his jacket pocket, and walked out of the room. A car was waiting. The car drove him to a private jet. The jet took off for Seoul. He landed at Incheon International Airport at 6:14 in the morning. He did not bring bodyguards. He did not bring lawyers. He brought one small suitcase, a laptop, and his mother's wedding ring on a chain around his neck. A car was waiting on the tarmac. The driver did not say a word. He just drove. The car took Kian to the Seoul Detention Center where Chairman Han Dae-jin was being held pending trial. Through legal channels Kian had arranged, the night before, a private visit had been approved. At 9 a.m., Kian sat down in a small white visiting room. At 9:02 a.m., the door opened and Han Dae-jin walked in. He was 51 years old. His hair was almost fully gray. He had lost weight in the 3 days since his arrest. He sat down across from Kian, looked at him, and frowned. "Who are you?" he said in Korean. "What lawyer sent you?" Kian answered in Korean, perfect Korean, the kind of Korean a mother teaches her son for 10 years, for a moment exactly like this. "No lawyer sent me," he said. "I am the boy you denied at the harvest dinner. My mother's name was Asha. She is dead. And as of last night, your company is mine." Dae-jin did not move. He did not blink. He did not speak. For 1 full minute, the room was silent. Then, very slowly, The chairman of Han Group, the Chaebol prince, the mafia heir, the man who had walked across a marble floor and taken another woman's hand in front of 240 people, lowered his head into his hands and started to cry. He cried for a long time. Kian did not move. He did not comfort him. He did not interrupt him. He just sat there with his mother's ring under his shirt and let his father finally feel something real. When Daejin finally lifted his head, his face was wet and his voice was broken. "What do you want?" he whispered. "Money, revenge, my name, tell me. Whatever it is, take it, take all of it." Kian leaned forward. "I already have it," he said quietly. "All of it. The company is mine. The shadow accounts are mine. The properties are mine. The name on the deed is mine. There is nothing left in your life that is not mine, Chairman Han. Even your son Junho. I just had a meeting with his lawyer this morning. He will keep his apartment and a small monthly allowance. That is more than you ever gave my mother." Daejin stared. Then, "Why are you here?" he asked. "Why come see me at all?" Kian stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He looked down at the man who had thrown his mother into the rain 20 years ago. "I came because my mother once told me something," Kian said. "She said, 'My son, do not take from him out of anger. Take from him because you can. I have taken everything. There is no anger left. So I came to say one thing to you, and then I will leave, and you and I will never see each other again.'" He leaned down, close enough that Daejin could smell his cologne. A clean, simple scent. "My mother was not a mistake," Kian whispered. "She was the only good thing that ever happened to you, and you threw her away in the rain." Then he straightened up, walked to the door, and knocked twice for the guard. He did not look back. Han Daejin sat alone in that white visiting room for 3 more hours before the guards came to take him to his cell. Witnesses later said that he stared at the wall the entire time and did not move once. In the months that followed, Kian Adeyemi quietly restructured Han Group. He shut down every shadow division. He cooperated with Prosecutor Lim's investigation and personally handed over the rest of his mother's USB drive. 6 Chaebol executives went to prison alongside Daejin. 3 corrupt prosecutors were stripped of their titles. Korean newspapers called it the cleanest week Seoul had seen in 50 years. He renamed the pharmaceutical division. He called it Asha Pharma. Its first product, released 8 months later, was an affordable cancer treatment line distributed at cost in 5 African countries. He gave Junho, his half-brother, a small apartment, a monthly allowance, and one promise that if Junho ever stopped drinking, there would be a real job waiting for him at Asha Pharma. Junho did not believe him at first. 2 years later, Junho walked into Kian's office sober for the first time in a decade. Kian gave him a job that same afternoon. Yujin moved abroad and was rarely seen again. Daejin served 11 years. And Kian became, at 21, the youngest chairman of any major chaebol in Korean history. The newspapers stopped calling him listener. They called him by his real name, Han Kian. He added his father's surname legally, not as forgiveness, but, as he told a reporter once, so that every time someone says the name Han, they remember it does not just belong to the men who built it. It also belongs to the woman who survived it. On the anniversary of his mother's death every year, Kian flies to Lagos. He visits her grave. He brings her favorite flowers, yellow chrysanthemums, and he sits with her for an hour alone. And every year, he tells her the same thing. "Mama," he whispers, "Seoul is ours, and Seoul is good now." Then he gets back on the plane and flies home. Asha walked into Seoul in a white wedding dress, hoping for a quiet life. She walked out in the rain, alone, pregnant, and silent. But the silence she carried out of that estate that night was not empty. It was waiting. And 20 years later, that silence wore a black suit, walked into a room full of billionaires, and bought a city.